Welcome to Inc. for Starters with Alexa Von Tobel. I'm Alexa, a serial entrepreneur myself and founder and managing partner of Inspired Capital, a venture firm that backs fearless founders who are solving some of the biggest challenges facing humanity. Now in our 6th season, we sit down each week with one of the best founders on the planet to hear their story of guts, inspiration, and drive. Let's dive right in. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Alexa Von Tobel, and this week I want you to meet Nick Harris, co-founder and CEO of Lightmatter, the company leading the evolution of computing, reducing its impact on our planet and enabling the next great leaps in human progress through silicon photonics. Nick started Lightmatter in 2017 to fully transform AI data center infrastructure. The company invented the world's first 3D stacked photonics engine called Passage, capable of connecting thousands to millions of processors at the speed of light in extreme scale data centers for the most advanced AI and HPC workloads. Lightmatter has raised over $850 million and was most recently valued at $4.4 billion. With over 30 patents and 70 publications in journals, Nick's seminal work on quantum and classical information processing with integrated photonics has helped launch the international research field of programmable photonics. Before Lightmatter, Nick was an intelligence community postdoctoral fellow and National Science Foundation fellow at MIT, where he received his PhD in electrical engineering and computer science. Nick was previously an R&D engineer working on DRAM and NAND circuits and device physics at Micron Technologies. And with that, let's welcome Nick. First of all, Nick, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on today and really looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with first things first. What is Lightmatter in your own words? How would you describe what you've built?
So I love computers, and it's my personal life mission to make sure they continue to get faster, more efficient, and better every year. Computers have had this incredible trajectory of progress through Moore's law, Dennard scaling. These are fancy terms, but the basic idea is there was a really clear roadmap for how computers would get better. We've hit a wall with that. And so at Lightmatter, what we're doing is we're figuring out how to augment computers with light to make them faster, more energy efficient, and guarantee there's a roadmap into the future.
I love that. Let's go back to the early days of Lightmatter. You launched it in 2017. What motivated you to start your company? As we all know, you're a PhD, you were finishing really important work. What made you say, I think I should actually go start a company for Lightmatter?
Yeah, I was deciding between being an academic and, starting the company. And I had always had an interest in entrepreneurship. I was very deep into science. I was leaning more towards an academic route. But then I realized with the research that I was doing, and it was all around photonics and using light to do computation and communication, if I really wanted to make a big impact, starting a company would be a good way to do that. And the reason is you would need a lot of people to really build these chips and systems in a way that has a big impact on people. And, if you want to go fast, go alone. And that's kind of the academic route. If you want to go far, go with a bunch of people in a team. And that was really the thinking that led me to switch from being an academic towards building the company. In terms of the spark or the idea that got this going, I had the opportunity to be very early in photonics as people were building the first big systems. And some of the chips that I built at MIT and the systems were the biggest that had been built to date. And during that process, I realized the level of promise and how far it could probably go. And I wanted to see that through. And I wanted to see the impact of light on computation and just go on that journey. So we got to build incredible things at MIT. And I knew there was a lot more that was possible with the right funding and the right group of people working on it.
I want to double click on that transition from you working in a lab academically to being like, this is bigger, this is a company. Did somebody tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, can I give you some money? I think something's here. Or did you say, let's go build this as a for-profit enterprise because we'll go faster? And literally, what did that leap look like?
It's really funny. In order to graduate with your PhD at MIT, you have to take classes that are outside of engineering or physics. And I took a class called New Enterprises. And I still have the video. In the class, they mentioned that if you win this competition called the MIT 100K, we'll give you an A. And I was like, deal. Absolutely. So I recorded this video and it was pitching Lightmatter. And I posted it to the website and it was picking up team members for this project. And I met Thomas, one of my co-founders there. My other co-founder, Darius, was in the same lab group as me. So Thomas was at MIT Sloan. Darius was MIT Physics. I was electrical engineering and computer science. And we won the class competitions. We went to the MIT 100K. We won that grand prize. We were the top company there. And then we went to Harvard and we won the Harvard President's Challenge. And I remember being on stage with Darius and they were asking us, do you guys go to Harvard? And we're like, no, we're MIT graduates. And they're like, why are we giving you this money? So we had picked up a couple 100,000 in winning contests. And it was pretty clear that what we were onto was something big. And it was at the right time and funding was going to be there. And so that's kind of how it went.
I love that. I wanted to ask that because I think a lot of investors like myself think about how do we go find the right PhDs and what does that experience look like? And I think that was a really good example of what that leap looks like. Let's explain the science behind Lightmatter in the simplest terms. I've learned a lot to prep for this, but what would you say is the magic, in your own words, behind the technology and what can it unlock at scale?
So the magic behind the technology. So computers today are built using transistors, and transistors are electronic devices. The physics of transistors is pretty incredible. And for the past 60 years, we were able to make them faster, more efficient, smaller, cheaper, better in almost every single way.
Yep.
That's completely dead now. And so the search is on for a new set of physics, and for us, it's light, that will allow you to continue the computing roadmap. So light is governed by completely different scaling laws. It isn't subject to the same challenges of transistors, and it offers a completely new path forward. Some interesting things. We'll talk about one of them. If you look at an electrical wire and you want to send data through an electrical wire, you can only send one signal at a time, really. With optics, you're able to encode data in different colors of light. So think about like red, green, and blue, all traveling in a glass rod, an optical fiber at the same time, 3 times the bandwidth of an electrical wire.
Wow.
If you do, 16 colors, it would be 16 times the bandwidth, and so on. And there are really special properties, including polarization, which you think about sunglasses. Polarization is the orientation of the electromagnetic field. I know this is quite geeky, but there are so many different ways in which you can encode information with light that you're not able to do with electrical signals, and it allows you to scale.
When you think about the part of the innovation that you have brought to the world, what are you most in awe of? Like, what do you find to be the coolest?
What's amazing is we have this idea for the technologies we build at Lightmatter. You always hope and you theoretically believe that you've developed something that's at least 10x better than state of the art, and it better be, because you set out to build something and it's a death by 1,000 cuts. You're going to keep getting dropped down, and hopefully at the end of the day you end up at 2x. What we've invented at Lightmatter is actually like 20x in practice, which is incredible. The number of times that happens, I can't think of a lot of examples where that's ever occurred. So the tech is exactly what we thought it was, and it solves the right problem at exactly the right time. And I feel really grateful for that.
That's incredible, Nick. I appreciate that point. I want to talk a little bit about your point of view on the landscape. So, you have such a unique point of view on how AI infrastructure broadly could unfold. What are your predictions for the decade ahead? How do you think about the world as you see it? What's coming?
Yeah, so there's this really clear relationship between the size of the AI supercomputer and how powerful the AI model is that comes out. And you're seeing companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta investing an enormous amount of money in building the biggest supercomputers in the world. If you look at LA uses about 3 gigawatts of power. Meta just announced a 2 gigawatt data center. Think about that. That's like the entire city of LA, and you have a single supercomputer that's almost the same power. This is going to continue to double. AI is going to have an enormous impact on the energy consumption of the world, and it's going to shape how we use energy going forward. And everything is going to be about how we link these GPUs together. Because if you want to link a million chips together and have them act like a single computer, you're going to need incredible interconnect technology.
Talk a little bit about your plans for the next 24 months. You've raised a significant amount of money. You're valued at billions of dollars. What are the things ahead that you're excited about and really leaning into?
Yeah, we've raised 850 million and we're valued at over 4.4 billion dollars at this point, which is just incredible, and it just speaks to the market opportunity. So over the next 24 months, the goal for us is just delivering our supercomputer cluster to customers, to the end customers, getting those online and really winning the entire industry. We have the best technology, the fastest interconnects in the world, And we have almost this mandate, like to just go enable these systems. So for me, it's about expanding sales, enabling all of the customers out there that need help with this. And there's a lot. So it's going to be a lot of work, and there's going to be very cool supercomputers coming online.
Nick, talk a little bit more about who your customers are in whatever version you can share. Give us a sense of how you figured out your go to market.
In terms of customers, the categories, there's two. I mean, you've basically got semiconductor companies. You think about NVIDIA's, AMD's, Intel's. And then you have the hyperscalers that are building their own AI compute units. Google is probably the prime example because they kicked off this whole AI chip race with the tensor processing unit. So those are the categories: the hyperscalers building their own chips and subsequent data centers that use the chips, and then the chip companies that are supplying to these hyperscalers themselves. In terms of the go to market, we started talking with hyperscale customers very early on in the company. We kept them apprised of what the tech is we're developing, why we thought it was interesting, and we kept listening to their roadmaps, trying to figure out what they saw on the horizon and understand what the timeline would be. And we kept those relationships close. Then, people move around. The market moves with AI driving the development of processors really hard. And it all kind of pulled in. We saw people being very interested in what we're doing. We developed the relationships. And then as AI drove hard for progress, it became crystal clear to all these friends that we had developed that Lightmatter's got the tech to make this happen. So that's what the go to market was like. Ultimately, business is about people and friendships and helping each other out. And so that's kind of how it's going.
That's wonderful. I want to shift gears a little bit here. You've spoken before about the challenge of hiring when you're simultaneously creating a new field. What have you learned about hiring subject matter experts, and what's your strategy around people?
Yeah, so one of the easy tricks is to go meet people that you admire in a field. If you're hiring marketing, go meet a bunch of CMOs. If you're hiring engineering leaders, go meet a bunch of engineering leaders. Just build the friendships and kind of learn what they do. Study these people. I'm a scientist by training, and so I've had to learn all of these different disciplines, whether it's people operations or sales or marketing or engineering. You just got to go meet good examples of these people. I think there are some good books out there that you can read on the topic of scaling startups. And then in my discipline, I think having the reputation of being very good at photonics and this sort of thing, myself and my co-founder Darius, we're able to attract some of the top people in the world. We attract from MIT, where we graduated, and other top universities. And we keep a really close look at who's graduating, what papers are being published, like who are the new up and coming minds, and we attract them to Lightmatter. So those are the two tricks, I think. And you got to be charismatic. And I'd say 80% of my job is sales and getting people pumped. And then hiring is a big chunk of that.
Nick, I am very impressed with just how scientific you are, what a great communicator are, what a charismatic salesperson you can be. I mean, it really is amazing, the sort of breadth of what you can bring to the table. We were talking a little bit about the future, and there was a question I really wanted to ask, which is, the world is changing in such a profound way right now. You're at the forefront of it. But if you think about businesses largely and how they need to prepare themselves for a supercomputing future, how do you think about that?
In terms of preparing for it, you need to try it. Like when the internet came out, the people who are really curious and they're like, kind of figuring out, they get the first websites up, they start to realize, oh, there's, ways to make money here. We get ideas like PayPal and all these things popping out. Be an early adopter. Even if you're at a company and you're not looking to found a company, be an early adopter, play with AI, see what it's good at, see what it sucks at, figure out what you can automate. We use it everywhere at Lightmatter. I'm constantly doing demos across the company, like in the finance team, or like engineering status reports, or summarizing data sheets for bringing up new chips that we have. We're always looking for use cases. So I would say you need to get comfortable with AI. And there's a bigger trend. You talked about what is it going to be like with supercomputers? We can't afford them. These are billion-dollar machines. And so these supercomputers are going to be at the hyperscale data centers, places like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and xAI. And so they're not going to be machines that people necessarily own, but you're going to be logging into them and doing incredible work. And you just have to get comfortable with what AI is good at and how you can use it by trying it.
I like that a lot, which is just eat the dog food. Like, you got to get in there, you got to use it, and follow your curiosities to the edge of what is new and innovation. I think that's well said. Last question before we move a little bit to you and you as a founder and everything that you've learned. What worries you about the future?
As a kid, I was always looking up to, Einstein and other physicists that really changed the world. And in the future, probably AI is going to be these great thinkers. And I wonder if that will demotivate future generations of scientists and engineers, knowing that probably they won't have the mental faculties of an AI supercomputer, like a 10 or $20 billion AI supercomputer. I'm curious how that will affect the development of science. What I hope happens is that people are augmented by it and that it doesn't demotivate and make people feel like they have no hope of being the best in the world. Your goal is to be the best in the world at something. But if you've got a robot or an AI that's competing with you and you have no hope of that ever being the case, I just hope it doesn't demotivate people.
I'm hoping we work with them. And I think that's part of why we're evolving together is to figure out a way to make it a very symbiotic, healthy relationship. And we'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Nick, I want to go back to you. You grew up in a redwood forest in California.
Yeah.
Which I love on your website, literally the picture. I always like to ask a question, and you very much come from a family of scientists and designers and photographers, which I think really just speaks to like the heart of the passion that you have in your subject matter. If you think about your childhood, what do you think stands out that helped you get here?
Yeah, I would say I had this like irrational obsession with computers, how they work, how to program. I wanted to know everything about this like magical little box, and I was just obsessed with it. And I had the contrast of growing up near Jedediah Smith State Park in Northern California, some of the most beautiful redwoods in the world. But for me, the obsession was that part of nature, design, and understanding how computers work. And so that was my whole world. Like when I was a kid, I was always asking for books on programming, computer architecture. My dad noticed early on that I was interested in this. I remember being 10 years old and getting computer architecture books, which is an incredible foresight on my dad's part. He managed retail stores. So he's not like a scientist or an engineer coming at this. He had a lot of insight to kind of feed that, but I'm just obsessed with computers. And I think, I'm watching my siblings and, my own kids. Not everybody's born with an obsession. I think it's a gift. If you really are obsessed with something, you don't know why, you're very lucky. And I was lucky in that way to just be obsessed with this.
That's like a real pinch me quote for me, actually. If you're lucky enough to be born being clearly obsessed with something, that is a gift. I've never had somebody put it so simply, Nick. So thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the psychology of being an entrepreneur and a founder. What psychology do you think is critical to be a successful entrepreneur?
You have to be completely unwilling to fail. Like that is not an option, and you will do anything, even if it comes at the cost of your own health, to make it happen. The levels of ups and downs with entrepreneurship are obscene. One day, you've just raised an enormous round and, everyone in the world is excited to talk to you. And the next day there's some issue with a customer or employee. It's just this constant roller coaster. And you've got to manage that. It comes down to people and having the right support structures and working out, taking care of your body. It's really hard. I remember when I was in graduate school, there's this interesting analogy. If you have to ask, should I do a PhD at like a top school? You shouldn't do it because it's going to be so hard that you're going to want to give up. And if there isn't a clear reason inside you for why you want to do it, just don't even try. I think entrepreneurship is like probably 10x that. If you need somebody else to motivate you to do this, like it's not going to be your thing. You have to love it. You have to be obsessed, and you're going to endure torture, but it's worth it, I think.
I'm laughing because I clearly have experienced my own levels of torture.
Yes.
I feel like sometimes we don't do a good job of describing the pain, like an example. Do you have a good example, Nick?
Yeah, we were in the middle of closing a round, and then SVB like crashed. We had 30 million or something in the bank. All the money's gone. And I was just so excited. We just signed a term sheet. We're about to close. And then it's like, we're not going to make payroll. I honestly like shed a few tears that day. And my co-founders are like, oh my God, we built the company to this point and this is how we're going to die. Like, are you kidding me? There's just so many things that happen. These roller coasters. Gosh, there's a lot.
By the way, that's a really good example of being like, are you kidding me?
The bank failed?
But a bank in the United States of America going under is why I'm going to go under. You nailed that question of mine. I may be completely biased in my belief, Nick, but I believe founders need to be really good at managing stress.
Yeah.
And like that can come in a lot of different forms. I don't feel stress. Like it physically doesn't hit me
Yeah.
as much as it hits other people. And I'm really good at sleeping and compartmentalizing. How do you manage stress?
So I love biking. I've always been obsessed with biking, and that is my thing. So I will go gravel biking or downhill mountain biking, hang out with my boys. I have two little boys, and they're adorable. Their world is amazing. And I talk with my co-founders because they're my rocks. Like, I love my co-founders. I trust them completely, and I'm very blessed on that front. So those are my outlets, like workout, hang out with my boys, talk to my co-founders, my wife. That's kind of yeah.
That's a good triaging. How do you think from being a PhD turned founder has given you an advantage? Is there something about being a scientist that helps you in the process of being a founder in your mind?
Yeah, definitely. There's two things. One is, and I remember when I first was admitted to MIT and I was working there, they throw you in the middle of the ocean on the research project. There's no life rafts. There's no nothing. Like, you're just ready to drown and you got to figure it out. And for some people, a PhD can take 10 years because figuring out's really hard. So you get this feeling of like, oh my God, it's totally on me. Nobody's ever worked on this before. I have to figure it out. I have to work whatever hours are needed to get this done. And that's a direct parallel. The other piece of being, an academic that parallels extremely well is you give talks. Like, that's what academics do. They create presentations, they present their materials. And the people who are the best at doing this receive the most funding. They get the best publications. So I feel like being okay with just being thrown in the middle of the ocean, having no fear about that, and then being good at presenting and like articulating ideas, those are great transferable skills from academia.
I never thought about it that way, Nick. That's really great, which is you have to be able to be a great communicator. To be a wonderful CEO, wonderful founder, a human being that people can follow, you have to say, here's what's happening and here's where we're going. And I never really connected those dots that is such a powerful part of academia is communicating.
Yeah, it's storytelling.
Really, really well. Okay, Nick, I'm going to move to a quick fire round and I just want to hear first thoughts. There's no right or wrong answers. When you are interviewing somebody to decide whether or not they should come and work at Lightmatter and they're good enough to be on your team, give me like your favorite interview question to get to the heart of somebody.
It's not really about questions. What I look for is extreme coherence. I'm looking for people that speak with very high information density. They're very clear and they're very coherent. If you can do those things and you're answering questions, whatever they are, like, it's an incredibly good indicator. I'm trying to measure mental horsepower, capacity, coherence, these sorts of things. Of course, their background has to be great. But if you've got that, like, man, you're in a good position.
That's awesome. Is there a quote or a mantra that you love?
Absolutely. So Bruce Lee, be like water, my friend.
I love it. Tell me more.
There's this great YouTube video where he's describing, if you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. If you put water into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. I think being an entrepreneur, you need to be like water. You have to become all of these different things at different times. And I just personally identify a lot with Bruce Lee's philosophies. And yeah.
I love that, Nick. I'm so happy you described that. Tell me a book that you've read. It doesn't have to be a business book. So this is just a book that's like had a dent materially on your life.
So for probably 30 years, up until the past maybe few years, I'm 37, I only read technical books. I felt like if I read any nonfiction, business books or anything that was like me learning about science and engineering and how the world works, it was a waste of time. But I kind of recently have been reading sci-fi books and things like that. I really love the Ian Banks series, The Culture. It's inspiring to look at the future, and a lot of ideas in entrepreneurship come from sci-fi futures. Those people are doing the same thing that entrepreneurs are doing. They're trying to imagine the future. And so going and living in their head and their world, I find pretty inspiring. But I wouldn't say there are any like particularly, maybe like Electrodynamics by Jackson, if you're looking for a book that inspired me. But yeah, that's a technical book.
I want to hear your biggest pinch me moment to date as an entrepreneur. So if you think about the last almost, call it 8 years, if you have to think about a day you came home and said, I can't believe that happened. What happened?
God, there have been a lot of those, like new chips arriving, new funding rounds. Meeting these people who were legends for me, there are people in the computing industry that I had always looked up to. Like I just viewed them as like absolute heroes, and actually getting to meet them was cool. You can think about like Jim Keller, who's CEO of TensorTorrent, but he was a famous computer architect who worked at AMD on the Athlon series of processors. That was really cool meeting him. And man, there's a lot of moments. I don't even know how to answer that. Every round is a joy. Every customer win is a joy. I've had some hires where I've really felt like I stole somebody incredible.
That's awesome. That makes me happy. Last question, which is not a quick fire round question we're going to end on, which is, how do you think about quantum? Quantum computing is on the next horizon of innovation curve. How do you think about it?
I worked on quantum computing at MIT. I worked on superconductors for detecting single photons. I worked on photonic quantum processors. That's where a lot of my contributions to science are. I would say that it's a promising field. Algorithms that run on quantum computers are somewhat nascent. There's a lot of work that goes into figuring out what software we're going to run on these things to have them be useful. And I have this little nagging concern in the back of my head, which is that I wonder if deep learning and AI might make quantum computers unnecessary.
Say more.
Well, it looks like, you think about AlphaFold from DeepMind. They're looking at protein folding and the ultimate shapes for proteins. That's a kind of problem, these molecular simulations, these sorts of things that you would expect was a quantum computing problem. And a lot of the promise behind quantum computing is looking at those kind of things. But it feels like deep learning is able to address those problems. And so I'm just wondering, are we going to need them ultimately? We might not, but let's find out.
But let's find out. Nick, first of all, you are such a joy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody out there, if you want to learn more, check out lightmatter.co. That's lightmatter.co. And you can join us next week for a new episode of For Starters with Alex Von Tobel. Nick, you're an absolute, just true entrepreneur to your core. This has been so delightful. And on behalf of, I think, most of the planet, thank you so much for the innovation that you're bringing into this world. We're rooting for you in every way.
Thank you, Alexa. Good to talk with you.